Hi, my name is Dr. Colin Campbell, and you are watching one of our inaugural podcasts for Pan-African Report. I'm here with Susan Belter, who's going to be telling us a little bit today about the country of Eswatini, also known as Swaziland. She is from that country and has now moved to Canada, or she's been in Canada for several years, but she's going to tell us a little bit about her country, her home country, and some of the issues that are going on there. Susan, welcome to the podcast for Pan-African Report. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dr. Campbell. Thank you for having me today.
Great. Yeah, you're welcome. So tell us a little bit about Swaziland. A lot of people don't even know that this country exists. Break it down for us a little bit, where it's located, what it's known for.
Well, Swaziland is actually one of the smallest countries in the southern hemisphere of Africa. It is the second smallest country other than Gambia. It is about 17,400 square feet, square kilometers, my bad. What can I tell you? There's only about 1.2 million people in the entire country. It is a small landlocked country surrounded by South Africa and Mozambique. Swaziland recently changed its name in 2018 from Swaziland to Eswatini. It is a monarch, which means that it is ruled by a king, and basically it's pretty much a Dayak, which basically means that it's ruled by a king and his mother, the Queen Mother. So they have pretty much supreme rule or authority over the nation. They are above the law. That's some of the things I can tell you just in a little tidbit about Swaziland, where it is located. Yes, I could go on, but that's just a little bit of an introduction right there, Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, so it's is it almost like the UK where you have a king and a queen, and so it's that type of monarchy? Is it a parliamentary system, or do they have a totally different government system?
Okay, so they do have a parliamentary system, but the parliamentary system is, in my opinion, pretty much void. It also sometimes just seems like people elect their members of parliament to represent them, but the minute that you pretty much disagree with how the system of government is run and you voice your matters, unfortunately, you will be ostracized or even killed or jailed. So it is pretty much run by a dictator, and so Swaziland right now is at the verge of wanting democracy. So there's a lot of unrest in the country, unfortunately. So we could go on with regards to that, Dr. Campbell. But that's just this introduction right now regarding Swaziland and where it's at right now.
So I definitely want to jump back into that, because that sounds really interesting, and I know that is a kind of a pressure point, the governance in Swaziland, Eswatini. But where the location that it's in, Southern Africa, what is it known for? Its exports or its productivity in comparison or contrast to some of the other countries on the continent of Africa?
Okay, Swaziland is basically known for its agriculture. So we import oranges, pineapples, citrus fruits, basically. We're known for that. We export that to the EU and to South Africa for its sugar plantations. Swaziland has a huge sugar plantation, and that's where it gets lots of its basically its economy comes from. As well as it's also known for its forestry. We have we export timber, eucalyptus trees. I believe that there's also pine wood trees and lots of trees like that. Over the years, though, because it hasn't really been taken care of as well, the economy has it's affected the economy a little bit in that way, unfortunately. So Swaziland is known for those things with regards to the economy. But one of its main resources is the sugar plantation. Now, unfortunately, the sugar plantation is primarily owned by the king. So most of the the businesses in Swaziland are generally owned by the king. So if, for example, if an investor comes into the nation, is he ends up demanding at least 50% of the company. And unfortunately, that doesn't go back to the nation. It goes into his own pocket, which has affected our economy and the standard of life for the Swazi people. There is something called the Dibio Dagangwane, which is an investment fund for the Swazi people. And for example, the the Royal Swazi corporation or the Royal Swazi sugar plantation is owned by the king. So basically, 80% of the fund will go towards the king, and then 20% goes into the fund. And this affects the ordinary citizens, because that's the money that should be invested in order to help the retired Swazi people. And at the current moment, unfortunately, there is no money in that fund. So the Swazi people are basically at a disservice. They've done a disservice to the Swazi people.
So are you saying there's a lot of poverty there, especially among the more senior members of the citizenry in Swaziland?
Yes, there is. There is a lot of poverty in Swaziland right now. So basically, Dr. Colin, the average Swazi, I'd say about 60% of the Swazi people live on less than $1 a day, which is barely anything, considering the cost of living is very high in Swaziland, as it is even here. So yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
Okay. How do they manage? You said there's no money in the fund that would normally go for some of these older members of the population. How do they get by? Are they dependent on each other? Do they try to sell their own merchandise? On a day-to-day, how does one survive you did say less than $1 a day, right? And I'm assuming
Yes.
that's USD, $1 USD.
Yes, that's less than $1 a day American funds. So
Hmm.
basically, Swazis are very family oriented. So basically, families help families. That's pretty much, I think, how they survive, or it's extreme poverty, Dr. Campbell. Extreme
Hmm.
poverty. Some people in the rural areas barely even have clean drinking running water. That's what the government in the last 35 years has pretty much done. Has embezzled the nation, unfortunately, and most of the economy goes towards the king and his luxurious lifestyle. So that's pretty much it. And the other thing, Dr. Campbell, that has affected the nation is the about 40% of the nation are between 14 years and under, and that is primarily due to the high AIDS pandemic of the nation. Swaziland has the highest AIDS population in the world. So that has also basically affected the Swazi economy, because most of those people have died. And Swaziland generally is one of the things it's also known for is a polygamous society. So the king, for example, I believe has about 15 wives presently. The late king had between 70 to 120 wives. And so most of the money does unfortunately go to the members of the royal family, which live an extremely opulent lifestyle.
70 to 100. Did you say 70 to 120 wives? Is that what you said?
Yes, Dr. Campbell, that's what I
Wow.
said.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So how many children came from those unions? Do we
I
know?
am honestly not
Yeah.
certain about that,
Hmm.
but I believe there's over 100 children. Or I might be wrong, don't quote me on this one, but I believe about 500 children, because the Dlaminis, which is the king, is a Dlamini. The Dlaminis are most probably the most dominant people in the Swazi society. I mean, not all of them are privileged because they are have that last name, but yeah, most of the Swazi people are Dlaminis.
Khamenei's. Okay, so probably a bit lighter of a question. The language in Eswatini and Swaziland, it's a very Uh, it sounds very strong and very proud. Like when people speak it, they sound like they're speaking with a lot of pride and passion. And I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Is there something that you could tell us in what? First of all, what's the name of the language? It's not Swazi, is it? What is the name of the official name of the language in Swaziland?
The official name of the language is Siswati.
Siswati. Okay.
Yes, Eswatini.
Okay.
So Swaziland was a British protectorate. We got our independence in 1968. So most of the people who go to school do speak with more of a British dialect. Hence, if you listen to myself, I pretty much was raised in Swaziland, came to Canada when I was a young woman at 22 years old. I
Mhm.
don't think I've lost my accent totally. But if you speak to a Swazi who went to an urban school, I personally think that some of them sound like me for sure. But if you want to hear me say something in Siswati, it's considered one of the Bantu languages. There's many Bantu languages. So in Swaziland, we have dominantly maybe three languages in the country. So we have Siswati, we have English, and Portuguese. So Portuguese is one of the reason I say Portuguese is because we have a lot of migrants that come from Mozambique to Swaziland, and in Mozambique it was a Portuguese colony. So yes, some Swazis do speak Portuguese. Yes.
Wow. Wow.
So
Okay.
if I
So
say something, what would you like
yeah,
me to say, Dr. Campbell?
you
I will
know,
I will greet you in the mother tongue.
okay, that sounds good. Just,
Okay.
maybe just a general greeting. What does it sound like?
Sawubona means hello. Sawubona, Dr. Campbell. Unjani namuhla? Ngiyabonga kwekuthi unginike leli thuba ukuthi ngikhulume nawe namuhla ngale ndzaba yaseSwatini, which means I said, hello, Dr. Campbell. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about the affairs of Swaziland.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And just to really quickly, how many letters are in the Siswati alphabet?
I would think about 26. I don't know,
Around.
unfortunately.
Okay. So it's
Dr.
similar to English,
Yes,
around
yes,
there. Okay. Okay.
yes, yes,
But it just the way that they're just set up sounds different. Wow, that's
yes.
amazing. Thank you for that. I know I put you on the spot there, but a
That's
lot of
okay, Dr.
people,
Campbell.
yeah, a lot of people don't have exposure to people from Swaziland, so I definitely wanted them to kind of hear what the language sounds like a little bit.
I can tell you, sorry,
Yeah,
Dr. Campbell, I can
yeah, yeah.
tell you that in the place that I am in Canada, I am the only Swazi in this area in 27 years. I have never met another one.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Wow. How do people receive you where you are in Canada? How do people receive you and relate to you? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people in your area who are not familiar with with the Eswatini. So or a Siswatini, even the language, just anything culturally about the country formerly called Swaziland.
Well, Dr. Campbell, I'll tell you how Africans receive me, first of all.
Hmm.
Most Africans, some of them, for an example, the other day, I went to the store and a friend of mine has a store where she sells African food and African clothes and so forth. So as soon as I walked in, she said, "Oh, I haven't seen you in so long, Sue." She says, I met another lady who is from your country, Swaziland, and I told her, we have never met another Swazi. There's a lady from Swaziland in the area. So she says, "Oh, let me look for that where she wrote the lady's name and number." And then she says, "Is Swaziland in Botswana?" So the point I'm making to you, Dr. Campbell,
Yeah.
is that even Africans don't even know where Swaziland is.
Wow.
And this is an African lady from Ghana. So
Right.
she was like, I thought, is it not? She said, is it not Swaziland, Botswana? I said, no, my sister, Swaziland is its own separate country and Botswana is its own separate country. So I said, no, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to help us meeting because there's really not too much we'll have in common.
So, okay, so that's someone from the continent who really did not have an idea about where your country was and much about it.
Exactly.
So then
Exactly.
I guess I'm expecting even less from Canadians about their knowledge about Eswatini.
Exactly.
Mm.
So some Canadians are. I have met some Canadians who have actually. I work with a lady with the company that I work with, and she's actually been to Swaziland. It's very rare that you meet somebody who's actually been to the country and spent some time there. And she said she loved it. This was many, many years ago there, those when Swaziland was still a beautiful, booming country. It was considered one of the it's considered at that time it was considered one of the jewels of Africa.
Hmm. Yeah, you said at one point that they exported a lot of lumber from Swaziland at that time, and you said this has kind of decreased over the years, though.
Yes, it has decreased over the years.
Mm.
I'm not 100% certain why. I believe it's because how the government is run. Unfortunately, so yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
Now,
that's just one of the things.
yeah, does Eswatini have any partnerships with other countries? You said it was very close to South Africa. There's some exports that go from the country to South Africa. You also said it's close to Mozambique. Who would you consider to be the most close ally to Eswatini?
It would be South Africa.
Okay.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely South Africa. Um, Swaziland, with this current king that we have, um, he has close ties with Taiwan. And because of that is Taiwan has come into the country and it's been at a cost for the Swazi nation.
Hmm.
I mean, they've come in, they have investments in there, they have businesses in there. So I guess that's where Taiwan would be another country that Swaziland possibly has ties with and allies with. Yes.
Okay. All right.
And
All right. So tell me a little bit about what media are like in Swaziland, in Eswatini. Is this, here we have cable, we have broadcast stations, we have publicly funded media here as well. What is it like there? Is everything owned by the government, or are there independent channels there?
I don't believe that there's any independent channels in
Hmm.
Swaziland. I believe it is all controlled by the monarch.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, Swaziland is a bit of a dictatorship. It is, I shouldn't even say a bit, it is. It's run
Hmm.
by a dictator. So media is very controlled. And now, because of social media, that has helped people create their own platforms, YouTube, um, Facebook. So that there has been a huge, huge advancement for Swaziland. Swaziland in prior years, Dr. Campbell, because there is no freedom of speech. If you talk about democracy or anything like that, you could go to jail. But now, because of social media, people have created their own platforms and are able to actually talk about the atrocities that are going on in the small little kingdom of Swaziland.
This must affect people every day, right? Some of the struggles that they're facing, some of the atrocities that you've alluded to. What are the attitudes of people there? Are they, always feeling a daily uh, experience of oppression? Are they angry? Are they despondent? Are they depressed? If you could encapsulate the tone or the mood of people, I know it's a whole country, so it's hard to do that. But on a day to day, how do you think people feel if I were to go there, if I were to visit, right? What kind of expression would I receive from people in Eswatini?
Right now, Dr. Campbell,
Mm.
since last year of 27, oh, sorry, of 2021, a lot has changed since then. Um, the mood right now on the ground is people are very angry. There
Okay.
is a civil war going on right now where citizens, because are not like America, where people have access to guns. We do not have access to guns. So what people use is to express their anger, they use the matchstick. So the matchstick, by that I mean that they'll go out and pretty much destroy or burn anything that is associated to the monarch. So that's how they are expressing themselves, because that's the king. They feel that they need to hit him where it hurts the most, and that is the economy. And because he has pretty much embezzled the Swazi economy. Swaziland is a very rich country mineral wise. Um, and there's a lot of gold in the country. They've started mining gold right now. And and I think what has also been to his disadvantage is to basically what they have tried to do, Dr. Campbell, is to silence the mouths of people. But over time, people get educated and they realize that this is not what the life that they want to live. So right now he has defunded the university and there is no education right now. And the schools in Swaziland are absolutely appalling. So if you can defund the education system, you can control the people. So that's pretty much, I think, one of the tactics of the current government.
That sounds pretty insane. So you're saying that right now there are no universities, or they've withheld money from the universities? Are they still
They
trying
have
to cobble something together as far as secondary education is concerned? How is that working?
They have defunded the university. So
Mhm.
students are not able to get scholarships because most people can't afford to pay for education, right? So
Hmm.
education in Swaziland from grade 1 up to grade 7 is free. And then once you get from is it grade 8 all the way up to grade 12, you have to pay. And again, like I did mention earlier, that poverty is a huge issue because there's lots of orphans. The orphans generally are raised by their grandparents, and the grandparents, some of them are uneducated or have limited education. And you know, as I do, is that in order to have a decent standard of living, education is extremely important.
Yeah.
So yes.
Hmm. So,
So the basically the mood on the ground is a lot of
hmm.
anger.
Okay. So, but if I were to visit Eswatini, they wouldn't greet me with matchsticks, though.
No, Swazi people, Dr. Campbell, are some of
Yeah.
the most humble, most down to earth, and most friendly people on the earth. So, in my opinion,
Hmm.
if you were to go even to the poorest of poor in the rural areas, you would be greeted with great welcome. You would be basically honored to the best of their ability. If all they have is 2 slices of bread and tea, that's what you would be given.
Hmm. What are the attitudes towards Westerners in general, towards the U.S.? There are different countries that don't always find Americans or Westerners to be their desired tourists in their country. What about in Eswatini? What about their feelings towards the U.S. and their geopolitics, or even their treatment towards Swaziland, which I don't hear much in U.S. policy regarding Swaziland, or Eswatini. So, how do people there view the U.S.?
I think people view the US like any other nation would, is as a superpower.
Okay.
I think Swaziland in the last pretty much year have been a little bit disappointed because of the maybe lack of understanding of how the United States involves itself in other nations, especially a nation like Swaziland. Swaziland is on the other side of the world. It is one of the smallest countries in the world, and not many people know about it. So Swaziland has reached out a number of times to the United States of American government, so to get help and assistance, but it seems like not much has been done with regards to how they have tried to go about it. So Swaziland, I do believe, has great respect for America as a superpower. Um, And people are basically well informed about America, but unfortunately, America's not that well informed about Swaziland.
Yeah, and it seems that there is a disparity between knowledge about countries within Africa in general. There are a lot of people here who think that Africa is one country, right? They don't realize that it's one of several. And never mind knowing the location of Swaziland or much about it. So when you think about where Swaziland should be today in comparison to some of its geographical neighbors. Where should Swaziland be today as far as its placement in the southern area of Africa and just where we are in a digital age?
I think if Swaziland had been run properly, Dr. Campbell, Swaziland should be one of the most prosperous nations in Africa. For many reasons. Like I said, there's lots of minerals in the country. For an example, now we just found out that we have gold. I believe we also have diamonds. Agriculture. If everything was done properly and taken care of, Swaziland would be very far in Africa and even in the world. So anyway, going back a little bit to what you said about how do Swazis view America. Well, America has been involved in Swaziland, for an example, with what we call UNICEF. United Nations. I forget what the I stands for, but Children Education Fund. So UNICEF has given a lot to Swaziland, to the children in Swaziland, especially due to the pandemic. I think they invested 400 million. They were investing an amount like 400 million into Swaziland due to the HIV pandemic as well. But unfortunately, what happened is because we have I guess a system of government that is, unfortunately, I'm going to say greedy, decided to purchase an aircraft, two aircrafts, and they said that if you do this, UNICEF said, if you do this, we will stop all contributions from UNICEF. And anyway, they stopped, and that's prevented 400 million coming into the country, Dr. Campbell.
So would that be every year that this?
I don't know. I don't know how often they would do it, but 400 million is a lot of money in a country which has the highest basically AIDS pandemic and the 40% of the population being 14 years and under.
Wow. Okay. And so this is where you have a lot of poverty happening. Now, this is just something that happens with more senior members, or throughout the population, there's general poverty. We're talking people in their middle ages, people just out of school. Is there a part of the population that is actually doing decently by comparison?
Well, I would say maybe like, okay, so if 60 something percent of the population, let's say 66% of the population is living in poverty, so that leaves only maybe less than 30% of the population doing okay.
All right. So yeah, so it does seem like a very frustrating situation there.
It's a very frustrating situation. So, Dr. Campbell, that is why people want a new government and they want democracy. We understand that democracy is not perfect, but it's certainly better than basically having a monarchical system.
Have any other agencies, aside from the United Nations International Children's Education Fund, have reached out to Swaziland, Eswatini? Have there been other associations, organizations that have tried to look at the situation there and try to help people out?
I'm not certain about that because I am not on the ground, but I'm sure there have been. And I know, for an example, Dr. Campbell, is that I did hear from a very reliable source is that they approached Swaziland. So basically, the United States Embassy approached Swaziland and said, so how are you going to run the country? basically, if we help you. And I think Swaziland, basically at this point, at least the political parties on the ground, are wanting negotiations. So this is another thing. Political parties in Swaziland are banned because it's written in the Constitution of 1973. And that is why some members of basically political party members or members of parliament are in exile and some are in jail. So I'm trying to paint a picture of what exactly is going on the ground right now, currently in Swaziland. So they want dialogue with the king, and they tried dialogue, and he does not want anything to do with dialogue because maybe he feels that he will lose his position in the country and so forth.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan Belter, for joining us here today at Pan African Report. We look forward to speaking with you in the future.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Dr. Campbell.
Sure thing. And now we're going to continue with Susan Belter to tell us a little bit more about what's happening on the ground in Swaziland and what she means by a monarchy in Swaziland. Susan, tell us a little bit more about what the situation is like there. And I know that it's a point of frustration for many Swazis.
Well, Dr. Campbell, what I mean by a monarchy is basically Swaziland is ruled by a king who has absolute rule and control over basically the judicial system, the legislative system, basically every stratosphere of the country. He is above the law.
Wow. So has he ever had to answer to anyone? I know that's a silly question, but what's it like when someone says, hey, I can't afford food, or I've been treated unfairly by, I'm assuming, local police that would be run by the government? So in the U.S., for example, we deal with issues that may be unjust or unfair. I'm sure you heard of what happened with George Floyd back in 2020, where you had a member of the police department who murdered a person. Now, this is regardless. We're not trying to interrogate George Floyd's past or anything like that. But the fact remains that you had a state-sanctioned member of a department, a police department, someone who, gets paid through taxpayer dollars, publicly funded dollars, who murdered a citizen. Okay, obviously that through the court system and through the legal process, that person was convicted, right, and sentenced. What happens in Eswatini when someone feels something has happened to them unjustly?
Well, there is a judicial system, there is a court system. I mean, if you have an issue outside of something, for an example, let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say George Floyd was in Swaziland. It most probably would go to the judicial system and would be taken care of. But the difference is if it involves the king. For example, right now is like I have mentioned that there are members of parliament who are unjustly in jail. People who have been murdered unjustly for protesting in the streets that just want democracy. So in that aspect, Dr. Campbell, there is no law. He is above the law. They have gone to court a number of times to get the MPs out of jail and also want to bring the MP who is in exile back into the country. They keep postponing it and postponing it and postponing it and postponing it. This has been a year. Why? Because Swazis are pretty much like how they don't have a literal knee on their necks, but they have, I would say, they have a knee on their necks because they do not have any say. The king keeps telling them, postpone, postpone, postpone. There is no judicial system in the country, Dr. Campbell.
Hmm.
The people are in fear because if they make a decision that they would feel is correct and right, is they would lose their jobs or get murdered or have to leave the country and go to exile.
When the king travels to other countries, do other countries ask him about conditions in Eswatini? Or is this
I, I,
largely ignored? Yeah.
I believe they do. But
Hmm.
Dr. Campbell,
Hmm.
the world hears, I guess, okay, they make it seem like they have a democracy, that Swaziland is a democracy.
Hmm.
Basically, they say because of we have a uh, elected members of parliament, right? Which are elected members of parliament. Therefore, we have democracy. Unfortunately, in that is not the case, Dr. Campbell, whatsoever.
Hmm.
Um, can you just repeat your question again? I'm sorry, it
Yeah,
just slipped.
well, I just wanted to see if other countries that maybe Eswatini wanted to do business with, commerce with, trade with, do they ask him, do leaders of those other countries question the king? Or is this largely ignored, the situation that's happening in Eswatini?
I think the government wants them to only hear their side,
Hmm.
which is there's democracy, there's peace in the country, there's freedom of speech in the country. Is that's why social media has been great and platforms like this are great so that people can actually talk about what is actually happening on the ground, Dr. Campbell. Um, I know, like, for an example, one of the MPs has gone to Great Britain, has met with other members of, I guess, political parties or members in power in Great Britain and told them exactly what is going on, and I think over time, the more exposure and the more people hear about this little country called Swaziland and what is actually happening, the more other countries we hope will not welcome the king of Swaziland because he pretty much has gone against all human rights um, laws, if I can say that.
Hmm. So you believe that he's violated human rights?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
he's violated the every human rights standard in the country.
Mhm.
People have been burned because they want democracy, burned alive. People have been thrown into crocodile-infested rivers. People have been murdered, shot. There's actual footage of this, Dr. Campbell, on buses when people are pro-democracy members are maybe going somewhere. They'll be stopped by the police and tear gassed while they're in the buses. So yes, Dr. Campbell, this is all footage that is available on social media.
We hear so much about North Korea and Kim Jong-un and just the way that he has so much power over that country that when someone speaks out against him, they could be fed to dogs or put into a prison camp and basically unheard from ever again, right? But we don't hear about the King of Swaziland. In fact, or King of Eswatini, to be more accurate. But earlier this year, he spoke in front of the United Nations, and it seemed that he was welcomed. It seemed that he had free reign, not so much in governance, in speaking of governance, but just free ability to collaborate, speak to whom he felt like speaking to, wherever he wanted to go. There didn't seem to be much backlash from the way that he governs Eswatini. Why is that? And what are people in Eswatini saying about that as they see the king of their country move about like nothing is going wrong at home?
Dr. Campbell, I also question that. Is I cannot understand how the UN would not even know that or would still allow him, knowing that he's gone against human rights violations, that he wouldn't be charged. I don't understand it, and most Swazi people, like myself, who heard that speech, honestly do not understand why the United Nations is not doing anything about it. We don't understand it.
Okay. When you talk about some of the opulence that the king seems to have and possess, could you put that into perspective for us? We do know that even in America here, our political leaders are pretty well connected, some more than others, but they stand to make money while they're in office. They may have fancy cars, they may have boats, they may have big houses. Even the least of those politicians and lawmakers seem to have pretty nice houses. Are you able to put things into perspective a little bit as far as what the king possesses, or what you've seen as far as your own observations about what the king buys with money from the Swazi people, even though many seem to be, from your estimation, living in poverty, living and struggling on a day-to-day, as what you said, you've said before, is less than $1 a day. Where is this money going, and what is the king spending it on from what you've observed?
Well, Dr. Campbell, he's spending it on an opulent lifestyle for him and his family and his relatives. For an example, I believe it was in 2019, he bought a fleet of the latest BMWs for each and every one of his wives. He's bought a very, very expensive cars over the years. I don't even know, like 120 of them at one time. He made history because apparently nobody in history has ever done that. So, and this is, he's bought airplanes for himself so he can travel. For an example, he has purchased a watch worth, I believe that the watch itself was worth $20 million. Just a watch. He wears suits of diamond, made out of diamonds. So, Dr. Campbell, this seems like a child who's actually never really grown. Yeah. And the thing is, what people need to understand is recently is he was told when he came into power in 1986, I believe it was in 1986, he was 18 years old. I think what possibly happened was the people that advised him or counseled him, they said that everything in this country belongs to you. So he has had that mentality that everything in the country belongs to him. He recently said it can actually be Googled and looked up online because it's all over social media. He actually quoted and said that everything in the country belongs to me. The people as well belong to me. I don't know of any human being that can actually own a country or even own people. So if that statement is, in my opinion, just blasphemous. So that's why I say the people do not have a literal knee on their necks, but they have a figurative one.
Do people have any access to the king? For example, does he go and speak to members of the public at all? Does he hold public forums, or does anyone from his administration hold public forums to reach out to people, to connect with people, so they can voice their concerns, so they could see what they could be doing better to serve the people that they are governing? How does that work?
He does make speeches, but I think when you've never experienced living under a dictatorship, what the dictator says is the final authority. So it doesn't even matter what people say. For an example, right now, it's been a year. The political parties on the ground want to have dialogue with him, but he refuses to have dialogue with them. It's because it's not going to be under his term, under the people's terms. It's going to be under his terms. And that's what he's used to. All the 35 years that he's been in power, nobody has ever questioned anything that he has done.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. That it seems that he is basically unchecked, and that he's allowed to rule this way without receiving a lot of criticism, whether it is from people within his administration, never mind, maybe people in the country are voicing this, but we don't hear any type of animadversions coming from the global community. And I think that's where it would probably make more of an impact if there were other countries around the world that were talking to some of the disparities and just some of the issues that are happening in Eswatini. Well, Susan, I really want to thank you again for joining us here today on Pan-African Report. I would like to have you back to talk about some of your projects dealing with Eswatini, Swaziland, and see how things are developing in your home country.
Absolutely. I would absolutely be thrilled, Dr. Campbell, to have this opportunity. And I'd just like to say once again, thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care.
Thank you.